Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are.
Hello, Estebancio.
Hey, yo, you looking good, man.
Oh, you're very kind.
Not more than Frank, but we are there, we are there.
Hello, everyone. We'll give maybe just one more minute for folks to come in as they do, and then we'll begin. All right, everyone. Let's go ahead and start. Greetings to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us on this fourth and last day of our fourth formal FWG meeting. I see that thumbs up, Assam. Yeah, we made it. We made it. As we discussed at the end of yesterday's meeting, we will spend a little bit of time at the beginning of today's meeting. So right now, and we'll take about 30 minutes or so to continue our discussion of activity 11, particularly in light of the presentations made by the different entities, as well as the need for us to discuss the draft synthesis document and the online tool connected with activity 11. I appreciate the inputs given by Graham toward the end of the last meeting, which raising some very important points for our consideration and for the consideration of the entities that presented to us. But I also note that there were quite a few comments in the chat during that discussion. And I'm wondering if maybe the folks who made those comments in the chat would also like to vocalize their comments in some way. But I'd like to open up this discussion to both FWG members as well as the broader group of participants here for discussion on activity 11. I also think I see at least one person who presented yesterday who is here with us today. Christina Dengel from the Adaptation Fund. Thank you very much for joining us. There might be others that I can't see on the chat list, but I very much appreciate your presence here today. Oh, I see Sarah Amy White. Thank you very much. And so on that note, I would like to open up the floor for a discussion. And I see Terrence as well. Thank you all very much for being here. And so let's begin the discussion. Estebancio, I see you. Go ahead, please, followed by Hindu.
Okay, good morning to everybody again, and good morning, afternoon, and evening. Yeah, it is great that it is our last day. I think it's been a very good discussion, and hopefully we can take some guidance from there. I have two questions to the presenters. I know that we didn't have time to have a question and stuff. My first question is probably to the existing funds for indigenous peoples. And and my constituencies, my communities from Amazon, from Mesoamerica, and from Andean, they always have the same question to me, how we can have a direct access to the fund. And I understand it's still from yesterday presentation that the communities or our communities need to go through a lot of paperwork. That's one thing. And I think that most of our communities, our authorities is still very oral people. And that's make difficult for them to apply for those kind of funding. Secondly, we need to find, or they need to find the communities, the third parties who can support them. What I want to say that at the end of the day, when they want to do a project, for example, if we are requesting $100,000 for doing some kind of water project, my communities won't receive that kind of money because that money need to go through for different parties, and at the end of the day, probably the communities only receive 40% of what they have requested. So my question to the existing funding, whether they, because we already have been asking or discussing with them directly, especially as a international forum of indigenous peoples on climate change since 5 years ago, whether we can try to find ways or mechanisms that indigenous peoples communities can have a direct access to the communities. And yesterday, we didn't listen. I didn't hear that saying that this is the way that the communities of indigenous peoples could get access on this matter. Second question is, I think that I appreciate very much all the presentation. I mean, I think that is a great presentation that you guys always have, and it's very comprehensive. However, I have to say, we are in the Facilitate Working Group of local communities and indigenous peoples platform. And when we talking, we are talking here about indigenous peoples knowledge. And yesterday I didn't hear especially that any existing funding expressed that they have a special funding for indigenous peoples knowledge. So I would like to ask to the donors and funders whether or not, yes or not, they have thinking to create a specific funding on indigenous people's knowledge or knowledge of indigenous peoples. So that's my two questions. My dear comment is the concern that we always had as a member of the Indigenous International Indigenous Forum on Climate Change is that our brother and sister from the north can get access to the same kind of funding, and we would like we have tried to find ways and canalize so we, at least in the participation process, we all can participate equally in the process of climate change. But yeah, it would be great that if the that agencies, the existing funding group could take into consideration in the future the facilities that they may also need, because they also need the same, or they have the same issues that we have, not because live in the first world, they don't need to receive any support. So thank you very much. Sorry, Joe, for taking long time to make my comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esteban. Yeah, no worries. I think those are really important questions. We will try to take a round of questions first, and then I invite the representatives of the different entities to respond if they can. So next I have Hindu, followed by Pasang. Hindu, I see you. Go ahead, please.
Everyone, thank you, Clemens, and thank you so much for the yesterday presentations from Rodion and Irina and the Secretariat, and also from the other MVT. I think I have a bit some questions from the previous speaker, my brother Estebancio. It's so nice to see that there are a lot of organizations presenting. They have a lot of funding for indigenous peoples, and then they are all coping with the policies and all. But I don't know, when they monitor a little bit how much the funding that going directly to the communities and how much from this funding that going to the climate change fight, or who change the life of the peoples, I don't think that we have all the millions or billions that highlighted there. We do not see them. Since we start advocating, of course, some of us benefited from the funding to participate in some meetings. But this is participation. But how about implementation of the project? Most of all those institutions are working with the government or with the big NGOs who require all the criteria that they do have or who respect it. And then sometimes they have to pass through it. They say, well, we cannot fund your peoples or your organization because your country is blocking this or blocking that. So I do not think we can be inconsistent if we have policies on indigenous peoples, we have funding for indigenous peoples we want to celebrate, and we have to pass through another obligation to limit the access to funding to those communities. And second, Estebancio said, there are a lot of criteria that our communities or our organization do not have capacity to fit, and then just to put a group of consultants to write the report or to write the project or to come back and fill all the box that they wanted us to fill it in order to get just access to the funding. And even if they do that, this access to the funding cannot reach all to the communities. So how they can revise those criteria, how they can make a direct access. Thirdly, we advocate in the COP21 during the Paris Agreement for the direct access to funding. And I wish that I didn't see the list of participants that Life John is there. Norway proposed to help to create the direct access funding for indigenous peoples. And the same international institution that come, they wanted to manage the funding because they say no, indigenous people cannot manage it. So there are a lot of babysitting behind the access to the funding. So when are we going to have this direct access? If they believe that our knowledge are very relevant, our knowledge are important, then they are all agreed to respect our rights to give us the FPIC. And then if we still do not get direct access to the funding, we have to pass through other organizations. Even if the government wanted to give the money, it's still a problem somewhere. So I think there is need of supporting us directly to fill our capacities. We know that FILAC did that. So how about other regions in Africa, in Asia? We wanted to have this also kind of institutions with all the capacity. We never born with all the intelligence. We grow up learning every day, and that's why we wanted to learn and manage the things ourselves. And my other comment coming to the activities that presented. So the mapping of the funding, you did it very well. I think the next step will be the recommendation. What do we want? And is it those recommendations going to be for all the funding or only for the climate change, for indigenous people's knowledge and within the convention, or it can go beyond the conventions? So this is very important to see into the recommendation, what we will come up with it. And how we can link it with the activity 6, because I come back again to this place of we wanted to establish a funding for indigenous peoples within this mechanism of the climate change. for our participation and for the climate action and for the capacity building, for the three pillars of the LCIPP of the platform. We wanted to have those mechanisms of funding. So establishment may be one of the big recommendations that can be highlighted into the activity 6 in your activity. So it will be really good to have all those clarification, and then it will be very good to see with all the partners how we can start together working in a different way. Because in this platform, we are talking about climate change, and we are talking about we have only 10 years to act. So we do not have other years to act. We cannot just to continue doing the meeting and then see how we can revise documents. We have to create this direct access to the funding to the indigenous peoples, to our communities, and to see how we can work in at the all level. And we wanted to see even the small scale project who can help us, not only the big scale grand project that who can go through a big organization. So that can be very helpful to see how they can link this emergency, climate change, and the direct access, and all the new way of partnering. Thank you so much, and sorry also to be long.
No, no, thank you very much, Hindu. And I appreciate as well bringing up the importance of recommendations, including in activity 6, something for all of us to keep in mind. I have Pasang next, and followed by Tunga from the brother group. Then I would like to close the list there to allow the presenters from yesterday to respond. I note that we have Sarah from Jeff, Terrence from Jeff's Small Grants Program, Mattia from IFAD, and Christina from the Adaptation Fund with us here today. So thank you all very much. And I see Morris as well. Morris is from UNOCHR here. So thank you all very much. So let's go to Pasang, followed by Tunga. Pasang, I see you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Yo, and thank you for the important, the thoughts and remarks and on this agenda. So first of all, I would like to really congratulate and for your hard work, Rodian and Arena, for coming up all this the information that you have shared. And also thank you, Chad, for your always useful presentation that gives us the navigation of all the existing funding, the opportunities for us to explore in the future or now. And also thank all the agencies for sharing your thoughts that how you are moving towards your priority for indigenous people. And then and also it's good to learn like GCF, JF, IFAD, and Adaptation Fund, and even other coming up funds are having more safeguard policy and more moving towards especially the IFAD and GCF with the IP policy, the target of the funds. And also they are trying to focus on the priority of the indigenous people. However, I agree Hindu and Stavancio that the still the thoughts of the trend of indigenous peoples presenting as incapable to handle the projects, and also as an object of being studied historically. That is what is been carrying on still now. And then the big threat and big challenging for indigenous people is now this trend is becoming more kind of culture. So when you talk about indigenous people, oh, okay, the indigenous peoples, who's going to have manage the fund, or who's going to help them, or who's going to write them, or this kind of trend is really becoming culture. So which is a really threat for giving the opportunity for indigenous people to build their confidence that they can do it, given the opportunities that they can build on their capacity to deal with that. And now with the whole this even the Jeff projects, it's good to have that they have ICI projects targeting for indigenous people. But the fund is so big, and then there is already been kind of a gap that indigenous people could not manage. So the fund goes to the other organization. So that gap is very dangerous. So it is very important that the funder agencies to deal with that gap. The gap that you have a small funds or bigger funds. The gap of the gap of not trusting or not giving opportunity or opportunity for building the confidence of the indigenous people to be developed step by step, that just you cannot just put your foot on the top of your top of the ladder. We need to go step by step, and that step by step needs to be supported, that to fill the gap. So I would like to, and then that is how they once if the opportunity is given to indigenous people to fulfill that gap with the principle of indigenous people self-determined sustainable development, and then the outcome of the target of indigenous people will come up. But so far we have a lot of many gaps, and that to fulfill that gaps, the direct access to the fund to the indigenous people, the direct trust to the indigenous people, putting them in the step by step ladders for them to build on is very necessary. The existing fund, either whatever is either in a GCF or JF or IFAD or like that, I'm not sure, I'm not really familiar with the IFAD, but the yesterday's presentation looks very interesting, because they have a more funding, and they have a regional one, which is kind of praiseworthy. But at the same time, for how many people are accessing to the IFAD fund? There are so many people who are craving for that fund, and the limitation of the fund may be one of the challenges for access to the resources. But in the compared to the GCF and the JF and also adaptation fund, and also the in the small grant fund, the technical difficulties, and then also the complicated process, the lengthy process, like always they have a steering committee, they have a national designated authority who have all the keys for the supporting, whether to support the indigenous people or not is in their hands. So it is very difficult. If we really want to support indigenous people, that kind of difficulties of lengthy process and this technocratics need to be revised and make it more simple and direct access to the fund. And that's the only way to fill the gaps and go and help indigenous people to come out from this, in Nepali we call daldal, that is like, where the food is submerging, right? So it is very important to go step by step and fill up the small gap, and ultimately that indigenous people with their own self-determined development, they could move ahead to save our issues and concerns that we have been facing, and save our knowledge and cultural practices and the values and value system, so that the future generation could be continued and protect the earth and environment, the crisis that we have been facing. Thank you, Yo. Sorry for taking long time.
Not at all. Thank you very much, Pasang. We do have Tunga, and then Daly has requested the floor. I kindly ask colleagues that'll be it, so we can allow our presenters, our participants to respond, and then move on to the next agenda item. So Tunga, please, followed by Daly.
Thank you very much, Yo. Let me go straight to my comment. It's really good to see different work of different funds, but I would like to make a comment that we are counting on different funds, but it's also very important to see how those funds or the work of those funds serves or linked with the three function of the platform, which is very important, because as we all know that most of those fundings goes through big international executing entities except the UN Voluntary Fund. So there comes the question of direct access of indigenous peoples and serving those funds to the three function of the platform. And second one is we are also counting on the projects funded by those funds, but how those projects really serves the interest and issues of indigenous peoples. Because yesterday we heard that there are various numbers of projects implemented in the land and territories of indigenous peoples and targeted to indigenous peoples. But I can give you a very concrete example how those projects have violated the rights of indigenous peoples, how we have been fighting against those projects on the ground. I can give you a concrete example, but I don't want to name and shame any particular project and fund at this public event. But the reality is very different than the principle we have been hearing from different funds. Because our fight, be it in the GCF or in the GEF, is that your funded project should take account of the rights of indigenous peoples, which is also one of the demand and one of the objectives of this platform. But yesterday we heard that we are counting on this project and saying that these can help to fulfill the objectives of the platform or have the facilitative working group. So again, I would like to repeat that we need to see things at substantial level, how the knowledge of indigenous peoples are being supported by these projects, how the rights of indigenous peoples are taken into account by these projects, how the life ways and different values and the custom and the worldviews of indigenous peoples are respected by this project is more important than counting on so many numbers of projects have been implemented in indigenous people's land or to target it to indigenous people. Indeed, those are the threats. It's a rhetoric. So I think we need to be a little bit deeper in discussion. I would like to draw your attention to those issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tunga. And lastly, Daly, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just 3 or 4 quick comments. Yesterday, I made a long intervention in chat, and I just wanted to simply say that I recognize that in the overall context of the UNFCCC that there are various different categories of the state party members, but that those categories shouldn't be applied to indigenous peoples in the context, especially of funding. The conditions are dramatically different. And I think that's what Estebancio was saying in his comments. The second thing is that capacity does exist within indigenous communities, nations, and amongst indigenous peoples, and that oftentimes we see initiatives being put forward to build the capacity of indigenous peoples. And this is why I embrace so much the original notion of activity for and the need to build the capacity of states to understand indigenous peoples and to understand indigenous knowledge. I think that when it comes to funding, we also have to recognize that the capacity exists, and that what individuals are saying here and potentially elsewhere is that by the time indigenous peoples are done ticking off all the boxes, the brilliant, wonderful, creative, colorful ideas that they've come up with just turn gray in the course of trying to achieve funding. And what Pasang has said about the right to determine our own priorities for development includes a whole host of things. It's not understood solely in economic development terms, but social, cultural, spiritual, as well as political. The other thing I wanted to say is that thank you, Morse, for your commentary. I know that you had a very short period of time, but the observation I want to make there is that the voluntary fund has expanded to the point of having funds for participation in the development of the jurisprudence of the treaty bodies and a whole host of other things, including participation in the work related to climate change. But at the same time, the amount of funding hasn't expanded. And so this is really where states and others that have the resources need to be responsive. So if we expand a mandate, there has to be also a corresponding expansion in terms of the dollars. The final point I want to make is that I think that the future activity and specifically a survey to indigenous peoples about the procedures that they have to go through to access funding is going to be really, really important, and will be, in my estimation, the biggest contribution that this particular activity can make. So I look forward to seeing that survey and hopefully responses from across the globe, including in the North. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Daly, and thank you, colleagues, for your comments. I'd like to conclude by briefly turning the floor over to the presenters from yesterday, to whomever wishes to respond to the questions and comments. Like I said, we have representatives from Jeff, the Jeff Small Grants Program, IFAD, Adaptation Fund, and UNOCHR. Who would like to go first? I think I saw Morse's hand go up first. And for anyone else, please raise your hand in the button if you can. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please, Morse.
Thank you, Clement. Dali, thank you so much for your comment. I think from the office, I would like to reiterate that our Indigenous Fund in OHHR, this is a fund that it doesn't discriminate anyone. From north to south, east to west. I think this is the only fund that any Indigenous person could apply. So, and you know, we've seen how this fund have expanded, and as Dali has mentioned, the challenge now for us is to also try to see how the base of that funding was expand. We do have a core base donors, but even that, especially now with COVID, I think it is not that we have a problem now. In fact, since we couldn't spend money this year, we are assured that we have money for the next 2-3 years at least. But I think the real impact will come afterwards, when our world economies will come in, and we'll see how this would picture out. What has been very useful, I think, for the fund in terms of of experience, lessons learned, is I think the board, the Indigenous board, has really played an important role in going after our donors. And it's also very useful that the other UN mechanism, the permanent forum, the special rapporteur, the expert mechanism, every single report that they do, they mention the fund, the importance of the fund. And I think this is what I'm going to recommend to you as well. We have to ensure, we have to find a way how the different mechanism also highlight the work of the platform, so that then we have a more integrated and solid way of looking at how funding is being used in the UN. Lastly, I would really encourage you for next year to look into the possibility of really applying for the fund. We have expanded even the number of people who could become a grantee. It has tripled since 5 years. At the permanent forum, we used to have only 15. Now we have 45, and this is a good news. But then again, we have the same people applying from the same organization, and this has to also change. We need to ensure, that the people who are coming, we also have new blood, so we need young people, we need women, we need people with disabilities, we need LGBTIQ in our Indigenous communities. So we also need to find a way to expand, the reach of the fund. Thank you very much, Clement.
Thank you very much, Morse. And I think I see Matias' hand up. And I do also recognize that Pablo from GCF is here. Thank you very much for joining us. So we'll go with Matia from IFAD, then Pablo from GCF, and Sarah from Jeff.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Clement. Well, first of all, my reaction is to simply to congratulate the comments that I heard, Indu, Pasang, and the others, because these are the real important things. You see, yesterday we presented our programs. Some of us presented big money, but in development, there is this principle: small is beautiful. It's not only important the book, but it's really the experience that we gain in our work. That if we are really willing to target remote communities, sometimes isolated, with limited capacity, it's not really the quantity of funds which makes the difference. It's really how these funds can be accessible, how these funds can be manageable, what are the reporting duties, because we all belong to bureaucracies, and despite the fact that we always say our good intentions, sometimes the reality is quite different. We need to be very honest with ourselves. That's why yesterday also, as far as IFAD is concerned, I presented EPAF. EPAF is a facility which is very tiny compared to the overall financing that IFAD does. If we think about the regular program of IFAD, we are talking about 700 million invested in investment projects targeting also indigenous peoples. But these are projects that are going through governments, implementing agencies. These are different things. Yesterday, I only presented EPAF because EPAF is a mechanism which is going straight to indigenous communities. But one important feature that EPAF has, and perhaps other schemes, I cannot say that I am entirely familiar with all the others. Yesterday, it was also important learning opportunity for me, is the fact that the proposals that we are receiving after issuing a global call are proposals that are scrutinized, shortlisted, and selected by indigenous peoples themselves, indigenous peoples nominated by the indigenous regional constituencies. And so this is an important element. And since as a IFAD, we are playing a function of secretary of the EPAF board, by listening to them, I was really impressed by the attention they were giving, to the fact that these proposals would come from indigenous organizations, genuine indigenous organizations, not NGOs, not intermediaries. And B, looking at the need of building capacities, because we should not expect that even small-scale funding can be easily implemented. There is always an element of capacity building that needs to be included. So these are some initial, well, a little feedback from my side. There perhaps could be other things to say, but I think these are the most important points. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we have Pablo from GCF. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come back and respond to some of the reflections, including some of the comments that were posted yesterday on the chat. So obviously, when it comes to the specific arrangements and the direction that the platform wishes to take forward, I'm not really able to comment, but I will want to sort of briefly speak to some of the very substantive and very relevant comments that have been made. Obviously, I think that I'm not pretending in any way that we can address them, because these are multidimensional, very complex challenges, and we do recognize that they exist. So having said that, in the case of the GCF or Indigenous People Policy, it's fairly recent, it's ambitious, it's fairly recent, and there is still a lot of work to do to bring it to the standard that we will all like to see it. And we recognize that, and this is speaking definitely to the points that Eileen made yesterday on the chat. We do recognize the importance of continuing to enhance this work. We can't pretend that we're there. The GCF is a partnership institution, and so in that sense, we are open to continue to accredit institutions, not just for the larger funding proposals, but also for under the readiness program as delivery partners. And these can be institutions that are national. I mean, and we have probably, we have many institutions that fit in this category. We do recognize that we have a gap when it comes to having direct access, and this is something that our recently adopted strategic plan for the current trust fund seeks to address, and recognizes that we need to increase the number of direct access, and actually sets a target for this. I've been taking note, of course, of the discussions, and I hope that we will be able to, in a more structured way, try to discuss some of these issues, or well, I guess it will be next year, but I like to perhaps also reflect that GCF, being a relatively recent in the landscape, has been scaling up, has now a lot of experience working with our partners at JEF, as adaptation of fund, at IFAD as well, which is one of our accredited entities, to make sure that we scale up their experiences and we learn from them as possible. And so in that sense, we recognize the long trajectory. But that said, I mean, continuing to recognize that there are challenging processes, that we need to recognize the needs and the sample, and the example that I provided yesterday, for example, of addressing capacity in Colombia for Indigenous peoples, it's just one example. It's not the end in itself. It's a vehicle in terms of how the long-term engagement in climate action for Indigenous peoples can be also empowered. And these are the type of things that we look forward to continue to explore. I understand the challenges around the issue of eligibility that have been mentioned. I really do. I'm afraid that as an operating entity, we are not really in a position where we can say much about that, given that unfortunately, or fortunately or not, it's a fact that or eligibility is defined by the Conference of the Parties. But I do understand this point, and I recognize how valid it is. I'll stop my comments there. We hope to continue this conversation next year. I have briefed also my colleague, Jennifer Ruiz, who is our in-house Indigenous people specialist that will be sort of further reflecting on a lot of these comments into 2021. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. And yes, including in terms of work continuing on this, like I mentioned yesterday, there will be webinars that are being planned for next year to continue this discussion, among other activities. So we welcome your further contributions in that. And so to conclude, I have Sarah, please go ahead.
Thank you. I really want to thank everyone for their comments. I'm going to say that I agree with you on everything that you're saying, right? I'm known for being kind of blunt sometimes. And so I'm going to give you some of the realities that we then face on the other side, right? I agree with you with what you're saying. So help us make the political space to change the reality we face, right? So the advocacy that Indigenous peoples have made over the years is what made it possible for us to create the Inclusive Conservation Initiative. It's what made it possible for us to, open these spaces. So I'm going to try to, be realistic, because I agree with you and I want to try to change things as well, right? On direct access for the JEF, I'll just be really frank. We don't even give direct access to any government. There is no government that gets direct access to finance from the JEF. So what direct access might look like with big JEF projects, I'll let Terrence talk about SGP, might not be exactly you get money from the JEF straight to an Indigenous organization. There's no government that gets money that way. And so, we are working in this case right now, say with Inclusive Conservation, with Conservation International and the IUCN, and we're looking at giving somewhere in the order of $1 million or more, if we can fundraise more, to Indigenous organizations, various Indigenous organizations in support of their conservation efforts. And so, I want you to continue to push this point on direct access, but I'll just kind of lay that out in terms of what the challenge is for us. We also we, as well as a lot of these other agencies, are funded through what is official foreign aid, or ODA. And that therefore makes it really hard for us to give money outside of developing countries. We have to fight to give money to any country that's, even classified as high income. So a country like the Cook Islands, it's always a discussion. What I will point out that maybe is an opportunity to try to see if there's room is that there's within the OECD DAC approach, if an organization gives more than 90% of its money to ODA eligible countries, the money can all be counted as ODA. So there is that little, there's that little 10%, which may not be so little in the case of GCF, sorry to call you out, or some of the others, but there may be an opportunity there to talk about that as how we could fund some of our Northern brothers and sisters. And I mean, I agree with you on all the requirements. This is a battle that we fight consistently, and you know, this is the donor community. We're both a donor and a recipient of money, and the number of requirements that are out there for projects is really onerous, and that's part of the reason why direct access is so hard. And it's the same countries that made and folks who are advocating for things that you very much agree with that are also then putting on one requirement after another in terms of what we do. And it's a reflection of wanting taxpayer money to be spent well and to be spent with adequate checks on what's happening. And, you know, and so those steps and requirements and having good examples. So one of the things that we're hoping to do through inclusive conservation is actually assess or provide information on how do you talk about Indigenous protected areas, right? And how do you assess their performance in ways that we can talk about it like other kinds of protected areas, right? And use some of the same tools, maybe with different guidance to do that. And that's trying to adapt the reporting that we need on our side to make our donors happy into the Indigenous context. And so, you know, these are the kinds of things that we need to do, but it requires kind of the support and the advocacy, which I want to give you all a lot of credit for how much progress you have made in that regard, and encourage you to continue to push us on these issues. And then I also would encourage you to think about how you make sure that the bulk of our programming will not likely be to Indigenous peoples. And that's true for any organization, the GEF, the GCF, the World Bank, all these kind of big entities. So it's also about making sure that within big projects that aren't Indigenous peoples projects, but are incredibly relevant to Indigenous peoples, that you are represented, that you may have, that, you know, Indigenous organizations are subcontracted as executing entities, so that both you can, so advocate for all these things is basically what I'm saying. But don't forget about the rest of the funding that's out there, right? That are very large sums of money and may not necessarily be going directly to Indigenous people. So in our case, having the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group that has helped shape our whole programming directions strategy means that they're helping to influence all of the money that the GEF is contributing. And so I know that this is, you know, I hope that covers a lot of the issues. I know I'm not providing you maybe the answers that you always want to hear, but I hope I gave you some ideas of maybe where I see opportunities to kind of push and change things some within how we work and to better serve the goals that we all share. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We are really way behind time, and my apologies to everyone, particularly my fellow co-chair, who is in charge of the rest of the beginning of this agenda of today's meeting. But I would like to conclude with Terence.
I think Terence would like to share something.
Yes, I see Terence. Please finish us off, Terence. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll try to be very brief. I just had 4 points. I think, first of all, on the point of direct access, Sarah's already described in fact, there's many different levels. There's the question of governments, international NGOs, national NGOs, and direct access by Indigenous peoples. Now, for the small grants program, the direct access question is essentially because we don't work with international NGOs, and the funding does go straight to the national CSO. So it's if you look at the report, which I put the link to yesterday, we've been analyzing the proportion between national NGOs and intermediaries or direct access to Indigenous peoples in the countries. And there are trends where we see over time increasing percentages direct access, not through national NGOs. I just wanted to make the point that UNDP has also hosted a lot of dialogues around international climate finance for Indigenous peoples, around the GCF IP's policy, and will continue to do so. And many people on this call have been involved in that. On the question of Estebancio on oral cultures, it's now over 12 years since we launched the participatory video approach. To be quite honest, it hasn't picked up as we hoped it would. Only a minority of countries are using it. So this is one of the recommendations from that analysis, is how do we push the participatory video? We have the tolerance to accept proposals like that, but we haven't seen it mainstream. So that's something we can explore further. And then lastly, I think, which is really the heart of this LCIPP, is how do we get very high quality proposals on traditional knowledge through whatever means into the system. And in SGP, we've had funding for community-based adaptation, for community-based RED. We've had small projects up to the $50,000 level, but we haven't always integrated traditional knowledge in the way that we had hoped. In fact, in the Pacific, we didn't even receive enough, even though the funding was there, we didn't receive proposals on it. So I think this platform can make some very helpful recommendations on the co-production of knowledge, and how IPLCs can work with, maybe in a respectful way, with in the way that IPBES is doing on the co-production with scientists and others, to get more high quality proposals. And that's, we really look forward to the recommendations of the panel on how to proceed. Thank you, Yo.
Thank you very much, Terence. And thank you, colleagues, the FWG members and participants, and the presenters and representatives from the different entities. I really appreciate you taking the time to present to us yesterday, as well as to join us today in this, I think, very important dialogue. Just going forward, looking ahead, as indicated in the chat and in our discussion for FWG members, we should try as best as we can to reflect some of these points in the synthesis document, the draft synthesis document, to get a clearer and more complete picture, as Eli says in the chat, and then look into how we can incorporate substantive recommendations in connection with this activity in Activity 6, in the recommendations under Activity 6. I just want to remind folks that Andrea did send by email to us a couple of recommendations yesterday with respect to funding issues, including direct funding to Indigenous peoples projects and knowledge protection, as well as how to deal with the issue of developed versus developing regions or states and the funding issues there. And I encourage colleagues to continue thinking along those lines in terms of concrete recommendations. I also want to note that, like I said, we are planning webinars next year to address more of these funding issues, and we very much look forward to continued participation from everyone, including the folks that joined us from the different entities and presented to us and dialogued with us. I think that's it for this particular activity. Once again, my apologies for going over time, but thank you all very much for this discussion. And on that note, I would like to turn over the chair to Andrea. Andrea,
thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Yo. And again, thank you to our Indigenous Vice Chair, Jane Owl, for taking on the role of co-chair for yesterday's session. I just want to start by noting that we are a full hour into our meeting already today with an agenda item that was scheduled for yesterday. So I'm going to need a little help. First of all, I'm going to make a chair's prerogative that we will not take a break. If people need to turn off your camera, get up, get some coffee or water, etc., please do so and come back right away. I've also asked the Secretariat if we can shorten at all the presentation of the trial launch of the portal today, to give us a little bit more time to finish the very important discussions that we have today. Also, I wanted to just make a couple of framing points going forward, which I'm going to make now instead of at the end in case we really are cut off for time. One thing that we discussed at the caucus meeting, as well as Estebancio made some points about the relationship of the facilitative. Could someone please please mute your microphone? Thank you. The relationship between this body, the Facilitative Working Group, and the platform itself. And we had a chance to reflect that basically there are two objectives that were created at COP24 for us as a Facilitative Working Group. One is to further operationalize, that word we have trouble saying, operationalize the platform. And the second is to facilitate the implementation of its functions. And we clarified yesterday that this body, these members of the Facilitative Working Group, basically have one more year to work in order to look and see how we're fulfilling those two objectives. We're doing a lot of activities and everybody's really passionate. And as I said before, I really appreciate everybody's engagement, as well as speaking for my region, the engagement of the North America region in guiding me in the work and positions. And I assume that that's the case with all of us as representatives of both state bodies and Indigenous regions. But I would really like to see if we could have, if need be, an informal session, either at the end of January or beginning of February, to assess, have a strategic assessment of how we're doing vis-a-vis the activities that we're undertaking on implementing these two objectives, and therefore what our priorities need to be in order to lay the groundwork in this final year, next year, of our work together as these particular members, and also alerting our regions that are listening. Our presumption is that there will be another selection process towards the end of next year for new members. So what do we need to do in order to hand over something that is the best product that we can make, given our objectives, to the new members? We have, I think, to talk about that strategic assessment, and I'm suggesting we do that in an informal meeting, if need be, towards the beginning of the year, so we have time to also consult with our regions on that. Those are just a couple things that I wanted to say before we get into the discussion of enhancing the coherence of the actions of local communities and Indigenous peoples platform. And again, because we don't have a lot of time, in fact, we are officially already concluded with the time that was originally scheduled for that discussion. I just wanted to share. Could you please mute your microphones if you're not talking? Some of the recommendations that we've made as the co-chairs and the secretariat of how our work together can be more effective. And this has also been discussed by other Indigenous representatives based on some of the things that has happened so far. First of all, we're charged with, through our work plan, of collaborating with other bodies in and outside of the convention in accordance with our work plan. And this item is talking about how we can best do that. At our last meeting, FWG 3, the members discussed how we can come up with some kind of formula for this engagement. We developed an internal chart of what we were calling focal points, because also Yo and I from the beginning made clear that although our rules of procedure within this body is invitations to engage, whether it's a presentation or participate in meetings, etc., come to the co-chairs. But we want to make sure that we're not the ones that are and only us, the public face in and outside the convention of this body. So part of what we did was to see the various interest areas as well as invitations that we've gotten for engagement, and come up with a chart that at that time was called a list of focal points, and members were asked to put their name by areas that reflected their special interest or the interest of their region, or their areas of expertise. It's been advised to us that we change the name. Focal points means something different officially. And in this kind of engagement, by the rules of procedure of this body, it's the co-chairs that receive the information. And then from there, we want to reach out to other members to see who's interested in participating in a certain activity or with a certain body. So the Secretariat suggested the word champions instead. We can really use any terminology that we want for this, but it's just important for us to be able to say, okay, for example, the Cornakivia Committee on Agriculture reached out to us with 2 events they were having. One was on livestock. It seemed clear to me that we should reach out to one of our Africa members involved in pastoralism on this. And a plan B, if they weren't available, is to reach outside to, for example, Sami reindeer herders and others that have been engaged in this process. But Hindu was able to do it, and so that's just one example. Another example is we've been approached by the IPCC and ICOMOS with the involvement of UNESCO for an activity that was actually discussed informally all the way back in Madrid at COP25. And Pasang has expressed an interest to represent us in those dialogues. And you know, that's I think a positive thing, that there's somebody that wants to and sees a need and an interest to engage in those discussions. So we have said, because the experience with that CBD invitation gave us 3 days of turnaround, and I was not just co-chair, but I had signed up as whatever we're calling it, focal point or champion for that body in particular, due to a range of interests and time to put into that. And we only had, as you know, 2 days to do a turnaround on a statement that would represent all of us there. And I really thank Daly, I thank Pasang, I thank the Secretariat and others that had input into that statement. But it was very stressful and it was too fast, because I also, with changes people were making, I couldn't come back to things that then would need to be changed or taken out that somebody else had suggested. So one ground rule that we've decided to make and propose, I hope it's acceptable, is that any invitations come with at least 7 days. We can say 7 working days, so that we have time as the co-chairs to identify who among us will engage, if anybody, and have time to also make sure that any statement that is delivered on behalf of Facilitative Working Group can be circulated, and maybe even circulated twice if it had to be edited to accommodate other suggestions. So that's one thing that we're asking the Secretariat to inform our colleagues in and outside of the convention, that we will need a formal invitation at least 7 working days in advance, so that we can have adequate representation, diverse representation, and representative statements that everybody has a chance to see. I hope that, you know, I've covered at least some of the things that we have talked about. I want to turn over the floor to Tiffany on some of these matters, because we do have also some very important things to get into under other matters, including the structure of this body vis-a-vis the planned inclusion. at some point in time that we're addressing in activity 6, some ground rules for that, of the facilitative working group itself. I hope that I've covered some of the things that we're proposing in terms of internal structure, and I hope we have time to talk about setting up an informal meeting to set our main priorities and do a little bit of a strategic evaluation of our work in the 1 year we'll have left after this meeting before the next group takes over. Thank you. And maybe Tiffany can emphasize some points if I left out anything, and then we can open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Andrea. Just a couple of things, because also Daly had mentioned in the last meeting, she'd like to hear about what are the procedures, or I think you've referred to it as TORs for this kind of a list. So what the co-chairs have suggested is that, and this follows what other constitutive bodies do when they have a list like this, is that the list be a living document, so members can add their name or take their name away from any particular process or body at any point. We just keep that as a living document, so members can send us that by email at any point and we'll update it. Then on the communications side, what the co-chairs would do is, if this list is agreed, they would look who's the interested person there, or the champion, or whatever you'd like to call it. They would email that person if they can't do it themselves. So if the co-chairs always get invited, but if they can't do it themselves or they prefer to give it to another member, they would then email the people that are interested and copy everybody else. So the full list of FWG would be copied, as well as all the alternates, etc. So everyone's in the loop, but they would at least have an idea of who might want to self-nominate for that particular event or body. Then once the nominee is decided, we would help that person to draft whatever statement or presentation they're asked to do. And that would be sent around to the full body again. So everybody would get to comment on the presentation or the statement. That's why Andrea mentioned that the 7-day rule would be a hard rule. So if an invite came in less than 7 working days, we as Secretariat wouldn't be able to help draft that, and the members wouldn't have enough time to comment on it. That's it, Andrea, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Can we have some parameters for the actual time that we had left? I sent you to see if we could shorten the section on the launch of the portal or move that to another day so that we have time to really come to conclusion on the discussion. Yeah. And I did want to mention one more thing in light of what happened yesterday, that I think that our time together, both among the facilitative working group, and we've made a point, we really want the participants from the Indigenous peoples to be able to have input into this discussion on a strategic level and concrete recommendations that we can address. That a lot of our reports could be either posted ahead of time. We don't need to kind of read whole statements. Some of the presentations could be made ahead of time online or in smaller working groups, so that we can really use our time together to make specific recommendations and ask questions and deal with issues that have not yet been resolved, maybe where there's different proposals on the floor going forward. I'm just acutely aware of the shortness in time that we have together as this body, not just today, but going forward. So maybe we can give us a little more time today somehow. I know we have a whole hour set for the portal presentation.
Right, so it's actually not a portal presentation, it's a tryout of the portal. So what we'll do is we'll give everybody, including all FWG members, of course, and everybody here, access to the portal itself so that you can go in and look around. So that's why there was 1 hour for that. The presentation is minimal, it's like 2 minutes. Okay. Just on the terms of the timing, we could start that portal tryout at 6:15, so 15 minutes late, but there are a lot of external IT people involved in that. So it's not possible just to move it to another day. It's already set for today, but we can start 15 minutes late.
Okay, in that case, I was wondering if there's any specific feedback from members of some of this structure that we've talked about going forward. And of course, any other discussion about engagement with bodies in and outside of the convention vis-a-vis our work plan. I mean, these are all issues that specifically need to be addressed in carrying out our work plan or our overall objectives, which I just read for you again from the COP24 decision. So opening the floor. Please raise your hand. Raise your hand physically if I can see you. Thank you, Pasang. Go ahead.
I try to see if there's more hands, but I don't see, so I take the opportunity. Yeah, I think well, just thank you, Andrea, for sharing all the importance and the our discussions, how we need to be careful because we have a limitation of the time for the completion of all the activities to be fulfilled, by our members. And we are really pushing ourselves, and hopefully we'll be able to fulfill our responsibilities before we hand over to a new set of the members. So I just have two things. One thing is I really, I in line with the earlier discussion, also to be quite here, it is very important that facilitative working group to work both constituent bodies inside and outside, not just only for us to understand and issues, but also to get the support from other constituent bodies and also bilateral agencies and multilateral agencies. I'll just share my some personal thoughts. So like in the process of the GCF, we were at least we were happy that at least we got some support from UNDP, understanding our issues and concerns. Have we not have that opportunity, perhaps we will not be able to understand GCF process more in depth and dealing with the whole issues and concerns. So and so considering this role of the UNDP, I feel like it's very important to have supportive hands, indigenous friendly, indigenous supportive hands, more organizations, whether it's a financially, whether it's a spiritually or culturally, whoever working on the indigenous people's concern, we need to welcome so that we learn and it will help us to enhance.
Pasang, please speak slower. I'm sorry, I've gotten a note from the translators.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Forgive me for interrupting. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you for stopping me. I'm very bad. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so considering the importance of joining hands and especially welcoming indigenous friendly organization, whether it's multilateral or bilateral or the organization, because at this moment there are so many loopholes, there are so many gaps that we cannot stand on our own, no, because just imagine that Jeff has a millions of dollars targeted for direct fund for indigenous people, but who's going to access that fund? Because there's no capability, there's no, especially I'm referring to the developing country, in the same case regarding our issues and concerns, especially recognizing our land tenure security, our values, our traditional governance system, our customary institution recognition by the local laws or federal laws or provincial laws. We need hands, we need supportive hands to meet our aspiration, to join hands in our policy advocacy. For that one, I really would like to welcome all the organization, institution who would like to help, but it would be mind that it is not like helping like indigenous people as an object. No, it's not like helping indigenous people so that they can manipulate. No, it's not like that. Helping in an ethical, really sincere way of like uplifting indigenous people, because throughout the history we have been suppressed, our voice has been suppressed, our language has been curtailed, our issues and concerns never been in priority. So give that chance for bringing that voice, unheard voice, to be heard, bringing the chance that they can build their self-confident, build so that one day the world will be beautiful, the world will be will be indigenous people can live with a dignity and respect. Therefore, considering with the limitation of time, I really encourage that our facility working group to welcome any organization, whoever would work with the indigenous people. And regarding this IPCC, I have also discussed under the activity 7, just one referring to that one, but you know, like if e-commerce would like to help, especially working with indigenous people, not help as an objective of the indigenous people, but helping the sincere manner of uplifting and supporting indigenous people culture and issues, concerns, and to be reflected in IPCC, I think we should welcome. Yeah.
Yes, I will agree. And I like Tiffany's suggestion of calling on this evolving chart, because it's a rolling document. Some other opportunity may arise that we want to add. Maybe we want to take off one if there's nobody who's interested in pursuing that. But saying, just rather than trying to coin a name like focal points or champions, just say interested members, because that way, Clement, and it's not an official, you know, TOR or anything. We know who to contact if we get an invitation from a body that, you know, has been listed, and we know how to reach out to see if another member wants to take that on as a presentation, a meeting, etc. So that I like that terminology, because it's not so official and it's more of an internal working method that way. Just a suggestion. Would anybody else like to take the floor on any of these matters?
I raise my hand, Andrea.
Oh, I didn't see you. I'm sorry. I don't see you on camera. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, I see you. Okay. I see your hand in the chat function. I'm looking at all these things. Thank you. Sorry about that, Hindu. Please go ahead.
It's okay. Yeah, my internet is not good, so I'm trying to get in and out. So in this agenda, I wanted us to notice, the difference role between the Facilitative Working Group and Indigenous Peoples Caucus. As during the negotiation of this one, we spent a lot of time. I spent even night and night there to see how I can negotiate with the other colleague what the meaning of the facilitation. So we must refer to that, and to do not just took all the role that the caucus also are playing. So if the other institutions are sending the invitation to us as Facilitative Working Group members, and then they start to just focusing on this body and forgetting the Indigenous People Caucus, I think there is a problem somewhere. Because it is not the role that we want to replace our formal body, who is the caucus, who can also nominate peoples and get represent. We can represent them to just to make the facilitations in this way. So I think these two roles might be a good differentiate and place it well by us as members. And I also think Secretariat must support us on this one, because otherwise I don't want to just have the Facilitative Working Group as the LCIPP just working on the Indigenous people's knowledge, who is the positive things, and forget all the rest of the things who are taken into consideration with the caucus. So in this way, it will be very good to see how we can be open and collaborate with other bodies and orient the other bodies if there is another thematic of collaboration, how they can pass it through the Indigenous Peoples Caucus. It may be much responsible for us in long-term way. And another point, it's in what Pasang said and just now, and we started to discuss about it since the day before yesterday, about our engagement with ECOMOS, with IPCC, because for the rest, and in this one, thanks to Secretariat, they make the tables, and then everyone put his name in the way that he's feeling or she's feeling to be coordinated with those bodies. And we expressed ourselves that those organizations, we work on them with them already in the local level, even with or without the Facilitative Working Group in Indigenous people's knowledge. So we wanted to continue this one even as a member of the Facilitative Working Group. And we just don't want to maybe to jump on it to say, I'm the Facilitative Working Group member from Africa or from Asia or whatever. We wanted to do it as the members. We represent all the IPs there, and we represent all the regions, not only like talking about our own regions. So that's why we wanted to take it and then discuss with all the members to accept. Even some are not agree on it, but we cannot have the same realities. So we have to make those consensus and accept to see how we can build those relationships in a long term that can help other Indigenous peoples in other regions. And finally, there are a lot of events that's going on, of course. I mean, they can invite the Facilitative Working Group members, or they can invite as peoples that they know as experts that the organization wanted to follow up with or wanted to discuss with. I give you the example, like I'm working with UNESCO for a long time. And if UNESCO wanted to invite me as Facilitative Working Group members to be there, so I don't think that they have to pass again through Secretariat and through whatever institution before to say like, okay, so now we have Hindu as Facilitative Working Group members. So we cannot mix also those long-term relationship and the role and also the position that we have in a different level. So I think we need maybe to have a discussion among the members to see how we can be participating in which event and how that can be under the name of Facilitative Working Group, or it can be under the name of IPs, or just under the name of expertise of someone. So I think that will be good to have our internal discussion among ourselves, and we don't think that we need to put all those stuff with the participants who are there, maybe who are not in the same level of understanding of all what we are saying or all what we are talking about it here. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
Okay, thank you, Hindu. I've noted a few other things. Maybe some of these, as Hindu mentioned, can be rolled over to our informal meeting at the end of January, because it is talking about internal working relations. But there's a few different things. One is, for example, when I was asked, we, the Facilitative Working Group co-chairs, were asked to present to the CBD. It was actually to a meeting of their entire Indigenous, International Indigenous Peoples Working Group on Biodiversity, the name of their caucus. So they have their own caucus, and some of the members are the same. I will just say that. So, you know, we also are engaging with Indigenous peoples that are part of other UN bodies who are very interested to hear, well, what's our structure? What are our priorities? What are areas we can work together? So I think we need to, you know, remember when we're talking to UN bodies, we're not just talking to secretariats or parties. We're also talking to Indigenous peoples who have long years of work in that particular body as well. The same might be said for UNESCO and other areas. We also have to take into account that many of our own organizations are already engaged in those other bodies, and some of us have been working in those bodies as well. I think there's a difference, Hindu, by being asked to participate in a body where, yes, your biography notes you're a member of the Facilitated Working Group. We're not talking about that, I think. We've already said, yes, people can do that. You know, it's in our bio. We are that. But when we are representing the Facilitated Working Group, I think it's been clear that people want to authorize that representation, see our statements on behalf of all of us, etc. So that's what we're talking about, is that kind of process. Also, when we spread out those invitations to the members, we each represent Indigenous peoples in our regions. So that would be the time, say, for Daly to say, well, you know, this is really interesting, and in our region we have, you know, this representative who really knows a lot about this. I think it's fine to, you know, on certain kinds of presentations, recommend outside of the members, you know, as members, to defer to that kind of expertise, just like they're doing for Activity 4 on the presentations that are being made. So there's are just kind of a couple of the points that I'm making. I think when we do if we're representing the facilitative working group, we need that support, and we also need an opportunity to approve the official statements that are being made, which is why we're putting that 7 working days hard timeline in to give that opportunity. Daly, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to point out that all of the comments I've heard so far are very subjective, and the earlier call for some terms of reference, I think, are important. But what I want to say now is that we do need to recognize that the Facilitative Working Group is a constituted body, and even just by virtue of that, as well as the balance between Indigenous peoples representatives from the sociocultural regions and the state party representatives, that we're not even actually triggering that dynamic in relation to the responses to invitations that we get. It seems to me pretty clear that the Facilitative Working Group, as a constituted body, it fits within a certain realm and mandate. And then everything else that's related to Indigenous peoples, it seems to me, it's probably most appropriate to go to the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change if there is a request for representation by Indigenous peoples. I think it seems fairly clear to me, but we don't presently have at least any. We're in a growing stage in that regard, and we don't have any thorough or comprehensive way to address the issue. And I think we still have to recognize the limitations of the Facilitative Working Group as a constituted body, but more significantly as an Inuk, as an Indigenous person, recognize that the 7 sociocultural regions of the UN exist, and that Indigenous peoples as a constituency exists, and that I just don't necessarily agree with kind of the subjective nature of all of this. One of the reasons is that when we're invited to a gathering as a Facilitative Working Group member, I don't know that I necessarily share the same view as even as you, Andrea, on an issue. And that's what I mean by how subjective this all becomes. If I have a responsibility on behalf of the Facilitative Working Group, it is that body that should inform, or this body, I mean, that should inform the views and positions. And on behalf of the whole of the Facilitative Working Group, I guess I need to think about this more to clarify exactly what it is that I'm trying to say, because I think there's important distinctions, region by region, individual by individual, all of these things that need to be taken into account. And I think you'll recall, even in my reference to a statement, that the statement that you gave to the CBD is that, okay, here's an example, but that example is specific to a region. So I guess all I'm saying is that this needs a little more careful thought. Okay. And to recognize that the Facilitative Working Group is a constituted body within a system, and the Indigenous Peoples Forum as a constituency is a significant force that we can use in favor of Indigenous peoples, but to recognize that there are some boundaries and potential limitations. The final comment is we can't control others in terms of, we can set a deadline of 7 days that we get an invitation and try to scramble and be responsive, but we can't always control that.
Yes, and I agree, and I think there might be, we hope not, but because that CBD experience was pretty stressful for me, trying to take in everybody's comments at the last minute, and I appreciate, I did change the specific regional reference to a more general one, according to your suggestion, Daly, in the statement that was delivered, but it was, you know, it was difficult doing that, like I said, because some are suggesting one thing, other members might say, well, that's not important, let's put what I want here, because we only had 3 minutes too. So more time will make sure that whoever it is delivering the statement is really speaking on behalf of all of us, and everybody's suggestions were very good. It's just how to fit them in and incorporate. So maybe because we do want to have more discussion about this internal way of working, I don't know if we want to come up with TOR or just, you know, an understanding of it. If we could roll that over to our next internal meeting, which I suggested would be, you know, at the end of January, looking at our priorities for the next year in particular, as well as how to do this. And if anything comes up between now and then, which I may in January, not between now and the end of the year, I think, we will utilize these you know, ground rules and process, and make sure that everybody's informed and that others have an opportunity to present, not just Yo and I, which I think is part of the point here. Just to end with that, is it all right with the body if Pasang pursues dialogue with this initiative and then comes back to us regarding, you know, what's being asked of us, and what her role would be on behalf of the Facilitative Working Group, so that she can at least have the authorization to explore how we might want to work with that project. Is that okay with everybody? No objection?
I do not understand, Andrea, which authorization to work with which?
Well, there seemed to be an understanding, maybe it was a misunderstanding by the Secretariat, that there was not agreement last time for Pasang to pursue as our designated interested member the proposal that had been proposed by ICOMOS, the IPCC, and I think UNESCO is also involved in that for engagement in that discussion. And I know you're already involved in that, Hindu, through your own representation. But this would be to authorize Pasang, as her request, to pursue that discussion with them and come back to us about what is being asked of us from this initiative on Indigenous peoples' knowledge systems, and looking at that relationship. There may be others that are interested in that too, but I don't think, are we telling? Yeah, okay.
Okay, I see that, but I think from the table that the Secretariat put, everyone can volunteer in everything that they want to follow. And then if Pasang volunteers, I don't think that she needs our authorization to go there. If she volunteers, she can go. And if someone else wanted to volunteer also, they can just join. And maybe this is our internal discussion. We don't need to raise that with all the rest of the participants, right?
I think we're saying, Hindu, if somebody's representing the Facilitative Working Group as a body, they do need our support or authorization to do that. I think that's what we're saying. If someone's doing it on behalf of their own organization or their own person, they're invited to something and part of their bio says they're a member of the Facilitative Working Group, that's a different matter. We can do that as we want. But representing the Facilitative Working Group, I think we're saying that that does require an agreement by us per the list, I guess, of interested members. Are there any final comments on this? Because As
anyway,
you know,
for me, it's not clear because I don't know if you have an example to give me in which body that we give the authorization to one of us to represent us, or it is the first one that we have to give an authorization to a member to represent us.
well, does anybody have any comments? My understanding is we talked about this at our very first meeting, because recognizing that some of us through our own organizations have been involved with some of these bodies and processes for a long time already. And sometimes we're also invited as a speaker that, you know, has a lot of different things on their bio, including being a member of the Facilitative Working Group for their region. We're not representing the Facilitative Working Group, but that is part of our bio. And we said collectively, that's fine if people want to do that. Actually representing this body collectively vis-a-vis another body in the UN, whether in or outside of the convention, we said does require authorization and agreement by all of us, because that's a representation of all of us. And presumably a chance to look at whatever statement they're going to make if it's on behalf of all of us. And I think we decided that at our very first meeting at the Substa in Bonn a couple years ago. Okay, Daly and Tiffany, and then we really need to move on to the topic of other issues. We have our closing ceremony. I would like to know if people agree to get together for an informal meeting at the end of January to kind of assess our last year of work together. And this could be a topic as well if we still need to talk about it. Tiffany and then Daly.
Okay, now I just wanted to clarify to Hindu's question, what is this initiative? It's the one that was discussed at FWG 3, and it's called International Council on Monuments and Sites, so ICOMOS, UNESCO IPCC Initiative on Cultural Heritage and Climate Change. It's a 3-way initiative that the FWG was invited to participate in. It was discussed at the last meeting, and not all the members agreed that the FWG should participate in it. So I think that's what Andrea was referring to.
Yes. And we have the strong view of at least one of our members that we should participate, and she wants to do it. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Come on, Daly, help me out here.
And then you have the strong views of another member that doesn't think you should participate. I think that's really where we are now, and that's one reason why I put forward this discussion. I think that this is going to require additional time and careful thought, and you know now I'll just stop there. I think that we just need to analyze the mandate of the FWG against a backdrop of Indigenous peoples writ large, and be a little more precise about this. Thanks.
Okay, then we don't have.
Hi, Andrea.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
I can't. Yeah. Okay. Good. Just interrupt. That's fine.
Okay, so sorry. Yeah. I mean, I think for the other bodies, we just like to put our name and nominate. And this one, I do not see why we can object that Pasang cannot be there. I think just to put her name and she can represent us, and that's it. But then anyway, this is an internal discussions among us. So you can put her name, and if there is any other discussion, we can discuss among ourselves, and we can move because we don't have time. Thank you so much. And sorry again to jump like that.
No, that's fine. And I know you're also involved in through your work with UNESCO in this project, Hindu. Okay, so what I would suggest is that we authorize Pasang to do further fact-finding about this body, this process, and ask her to share with us at our next meeting why she thinks it's important and why it fits in with our work plan and mandate that we be involved in this. So just between, as a basically not agreeing to be in the partnership or anything, but to designate one of our members who has a strong interest and enthusiasm for this project to find out more about it, come back to us and make the presentation, giving maybe some of the information that Daly needs. And maybe Daly and Pasang should communicate outside of this meeting together so that you can get a better idea of Daly's concerns, Pasang, and work on trying to address those when we come back to our next meeting. And I see Andrew on there. If you know, you can work with Pasang to get that information, and please Daly and Pasang talk to each other about this so there can be more clarity on the issue. I don't think any of the other members had those concerns, and I think it's important that Daly's concerns be addressed as we move forward. So, you know, if that's okay with people, we can discuss it at our informal meeting in January, as well as some of the other, if there are other concerns about the way that we are organizing this interested persons format. And making sure, clarifying when we're representing FWG and what needs to happen for that versus when we're participating as individuals or representatives of our own organizations in these same bodies. And this requires a little bit more discussion, if that's okay. Meanwhile, we'll stick to these rolling procedures and talk more about them. Is that acceptable to everybody? Are we good? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, our next issue here, unless Tiffany, you need to take the floor. I notice in my annotated agenda you're listed here, but I'm on to any other matters, and I think we have about 15 minutes on that, since we've been given a little bit more time from the portal. I keep forgetting practice session, or what we're calling what we're doing with the portal, and we want to, before that time, have our closing ceremony. So under other matters, I know there was some discussion already, especially in the discussion around Article 6 regarding, which is again, Activity 6, sorry, which is our proposal to the substa. And now we're including some concerns about funding as well there, because it is about participation and engagement. Is looking at, and again, I had an opportunity to read as I looked at it for our objectives, the resolution from COP24, forming the Facilitative Working Group. And there's been a lot of concerns expressed around the issue and questions for us around the issue of how local communities will be incorporated, under what criteria, and we've included some of those, our recommendations in Activity 6. But there's a structural issue too that began to be discussed at the Indigenous caucus meeting, the last two times that it met, that I was there, but also within our region, which is our working body engaging with this process is called the North America Indigenous Peoples Working Group on Climate Change. So the whole issue of when local communities come forward, self-organize, self-identify, etc., and want to assume, as the resolution from the COP says, at least three slots, that states will also want an additional number of slots so that they are equal in number to the combination of local communities and Indigenous peoples. However, I went back to COP23, and the resolution from the COP represents or recommends that Indigenous peoples and states have equal status, which including in leadership roles of this body. So that's a little bit of a conflict there that is being flagged by some of us. And I'd like to ask the Secretariat to clarify what that process or decision means, because I know my region at least, and I think many of the other Indigenous regions are going to have a real issue if suddenly we numerically become the minority in this body, which was set up to address our knowledge and our rights around our knowledge. So maybe, you know, this is an issue that I think we need to at least put on the table here and see how we feel about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. So I understand that you'd like me to refer to Decision 2 CP24, is that right?
Well, you may have more inside information about how this really will proceed and take place that we need to then come back and discuss in our regions.
Okay, it's not so much for us to say, but I can share, you know, what is in the decision and what's going to happen next year. So basically, and I can put the relevant paras in the chat. So there will be a review next year at the end of the year, and that'll take into account a report, right? So that's para 27. The report is then mentioned in para 24. And I'm referring to decision 2 CP 24 here, and I'm sorry if it's a lot of jargon, but we'll put the relevant stuff in the chat. That report is requested of the Facilitative Working Group. That report's going to inform the review. So then on the issue of local communities, most of you are very familiar with paragraph 4 because you negotiated it, and that's about requesting the SABSTA to consider, in the context of that review that I mentioned, the addition of at least 3 representatives from local communities, as well as an equal number of parties. And that whole paragraph 4 is in the context, taking into account progress related to representation of local communities. Then there's a couple of other paras that also refer to local communities, and that's about how parties are invited to promote the engagement of local communities in the LCIPP with a view to enhancing their participation in the FWG. And there's another para that says, requested us as the Secretary to organize a thematic workshop on this issue, and that was held back in 2019, and most of you were at that workshop, so I don't need to go into details on that. So that's basically what's happening next year. And then in parallel, there are processes where constituents come together in different constituencies. There are 9 formal constituencies based on the Agenda 21 document, the major groups. There are also some informal constituencies that have been formed, such as faith-based organizations. So in parallel, there's that process that's happening. Thanks, Andrea.
Okay. We have already added in our draft activity 6 text a proposal for how the process of engagement of local communities must be carried forth. It's not up to us as Indigenous peoples. It's not up to states. You know, they need to be self-identified, self-mobilized, self-organized, etc. And that take place through an informal constituency process, just like any others, in addition to the 9 original constituencies or major groups set out in 1992 at the first Earth Summit. Those, you know, aren't added to. But what concerns me is the numbers issue, and then how much our recommendation to the SABSTA per activity 6 can really make an impact to change this discussion, or to ensure that the COP23 recommendation of equal status between Indigenous peoples and states, which means equal membership, equal leadership, etc. And that was a position of the Indigenous caucus since the beginning of this discussion, back at COP21. How these things can be reconciled using a rights-based approach, and how it could be changed through our recommendation. I don't know how people feel about this discussion. I'm going to open it up to members for comment. Yo.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I agree that this is an important and sensitive issue. and I'm in the hands of members on how to address this. I will note that we have limited time available to us, and perhaps this can benefit from a more extensive discussion at a different time, perhaps during the informal meeting that we're planning for next month or the next couple of months. But also noting that there have been some concerns raised by at least one of our members about discussing this issue of local communities at least at this point. And so my suggestion is that we consider this item more fully at a later time. Thank you.
I raise my hand if there is no one.
Go ahead, Hindu.
Okay, thank you. I think this item, Andrea, is a item of negotiation, because the decision give us the mandate only to do a report of how the possibility to involve the local communities in the platform. And then the rest of how many and how it works, it will be again around the negotiation through an agenda item that will be created. And then the parties will come, and then the Indigenous caucus will come, and we will discuss and negotiate around it. And if we want to, we are concerned about the having our equal status, we can take it again and come back again and show that how we want to apply our principles in all. So I think so far in the decisions that what I know, and I agree with you, I think we can push this agenda to another discussion, because it is very important and it's require a lot of time to discuss on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do take note of the recommendation to put this on the schedule for our informal discussion and what our strategy is going to be around this. I know I think we have about 10 minutes before we're going to have our closing ceremony, and then go into the portal discussion. I would like to ask if there are any members of the caucus or the participants that would like to make their views heard on this discussion. I am going to need to see, yeah, turn on your video if you want to speak. I would like to help ask, okay, Frank Edwajicic, I see your hand. I'd like to get the help of the Secretariat to let me know if you see any other hands raised. I can't see everything here. Frank, please go, take the floor.
This last item that we've been talking about, we've got to remember not to confuse the Facilitative Working Group with the platform. And the local communities are definitely part of the platform. And we anticipated that they would be part of the Facilitative Working Group if a constituency was formed and they'd be there. But we remember that the Facilitative Working Group, as has been brought up several times during this meeting the last few days, is not necessarily a permanent body that's going to exist through all time, but rather it's a body to operationalize the platform and figure out how that's going to work. So a lot of the discussion about this participation, it may be, if we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to incorporate the local communities into the Facilitative Working Group, the working group might be gone before there are Indigenous local communities that have formed a constituency. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about the fact that the local communities will be involved in the platform, because the platform is what exists outside of this operationalization of the platform by the Facilitative Working Group. So it seems like it's a subtle point, but it's one that I think we should keep in mind, that it's important for us to be thinking about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments in the few minutes we have left from either the participants, the IPO's representatives, or the members? Thomas, you have your hand up?
Yep.
Take the floor,
thanks, Andrea.
please. Okay.
Thanks. Just to build off what Hindu was saying about it being more of an item of negotiation and understanding the FWG's role, I just wanted to ask a point to the Secretariat about clarification on the report that the FWG is going to produce. Is there any guidance on what this will contain, including whether there'll be like a report on the level of participation of local communities in platform activities thus far, or is it really kind of the purview of FWG members to decide what goes into that report? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Andrea, now?
Go, please, yes.
Thanks. So the paragraph basically asks the FWG to report on its, well, first of all, its outcomes. Annex to that would go a draft second 3-year work plan. So that's part of the annex. So that would be from 2022, 23, and 24. And to report on the activities of the LCIPP, so the 12 activities. And so it's those 3 things. But also annexed to that report would go the 2 sets of recommendations that are mandated in the work plan.
So part of what we need to focus on next year is developing a new work plan. Is that correct? For the new members to carry out. Okay, well, let's talk about that in January too, is what the time frame and assignments are around that. Are there any other comments?
I have another comment, Andrea.
Please go ahead.
One. Okay, thank you. I wanted us to note from this report of the WFG4, the online meeting is not facilitating the participation of all the regions. And especially I make this point during also FWG3. So it is limiting a lot of people from our communities to participate. I don't want us to be hurry and having the things in this way, and it cannot include or benefit the knowledge holders, the communities who do not have access to the electricity or to the internet. And I'm not talking only about the members. I'm talking about the people who are supposed to participate and who have to buy the internet very expensive, and they cannot do that because if it is in a person meeting that maybe some organization have funding for them to attend. So if that can be met, this report as a recommendation, or I don't know, our conclusion, it will be really very relevant. And at the same time, we have to slow down the work of the Facilitative Working Group, and this is the members can decide on this one. We cannot do the things on hurry and count the numbers of the report, the numbers of the meeting that we have, rather than say like which kind of action that we really realize in the benefit of the communities. And I'm saying that because if all of you saw the report of the UNEP on the gap reports that highlighting the world is going to the 3 degrees. So if we are doing the things and world is going to the 3 degrees, so what are we contributing to make it slow? And as I said, I am coming from the region who already have plus 1.5 degree. So I do not allow myself that to just be sitting in the meeting and then participating, and others cannot participate, and then we cannot like include them. We do not do a real action that can really reduce all this vulnerability risk, and who can include the voices of the communities on a different level. So I really want to that we know that in this report, and while we will organize the next WFG meeting, we have to consider all those and make our best to improve how the participation of everyone and each can be possible. I am sure we can do that, because when the first meeting we had virtually, there was no interpretation, and Secretariat do not allow to do meeting with Zoom, and we fix it now. We are doing the meeting with Zoom, and we have the interpretation. So in this capacity of participation also, we can do that. We are capable to do it, and maybe we can find any strategy and have the better participation of the peoples that we are representing in our most vulnerable regions. Thank you so much, and so happy to be with all of you, wishing you a very good holidays, and hope that 2021 will be best for us than this 2020, who have a lot of challenge for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And that was also my suggestion, Hindu, that we really look at the year we have left and prioritize what we want to do. I think we've been very rushed to get all these activities done and have not done enough maybe overall strategic assessment of the priorities so that we're not so rushed. We do have time to consult with our regions, and I know I'm fully aware of the range of access on a regional basis, and even many of our communities within our regions in some areas, you know, have the same challenge for internet access. So even in North America. With that, are there any other final comments on this particular topic, or that would go under other matters? We have agreed, I think, to have a meeting early on and to take consultation on this exact issue. What is the most important? What is the most vital? How can we enhance accessibility of these dialogues, and also impact on the ground? When we talk in January, but hopefully, and I'm really requesting and urging all of us to have a conversation about this before we meet with our regions and with our with whoever it is we're charged to represent on this body, so that we can bring not just our own subjective viewpoints, but the points of view of our region into the strategic prioritization of our final year together. Daly, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say briefly that we have to also recognize that there's just so much that's beyond our control. You know, and the pandemic has really highlighted that for all of us. So we were already at a point where we faced barriers and challenges, and then the Facilitative Working Group, indeed the whole UNFCCC and all of its associated bodies and organs have been faced with huge challenges. And I think we should recognize that we're facing fatigue, just in terms of our use of Zoom. The other thing that I want to say is that I think that we've now had updates on all of the activities. It seems pretty clear that we were extremely ambitious in areas where we may, you know, that the next Facilitative Working Group composition of members might learn from what we've experienced so far in terms of the listing of all these activities and the kind of the dispersed energy, and recognize the need to really hone in and identify the top 3 priorities on behalf of Indigenous peoples, for example, and really ensure that we identify what those priorities mean to Indigenous peoples, what they happen to be, and that maybe that's an important thing for the Facilitative Working Group to consider doing, is to gain the input, I don't know, by dialogue with the Indigenous Peoples Forum, or a survey, or some other means to really identify the doable, effective priorities, and then also follow up with evaluation. And I guess I'm just saying this in light of the review of the work of the FWG and our future initiatives as Indigenous peoples, and hopefully the continuing role of the FWG in this larger context. I was thinking to myself that we even in this session rushed through getting the updates of the activities, and there's so much more that needs to be done. Even a single activity like Indigenous knowledge could take up decades, not simply, you know, an activity within a 2-year work plan. So I don't know, I just thinking about the future, the fact that even myself as the Arctic region representative will hand this off to the next individual, and in our case, the rotation between Inuit and Sami. the overwhelming amount of work doesn't even begin to address the larger global crisis that we're facing. And then on behalf of our regions, it's intensified to the 10th power, you know, when we look at the matters at the micro level and at the macro level, the scales aren't, in my opinion, the scales aren't aligning in any way, shape, or form, and that we have to really use our energy in a very strategic, focused way. So, you know, even today, our conversations have been rushed. As someone has noted, it seems that emotions are running actually fairly high because of the discussion we had on, you know, the role of the FWG, its limitations, and also, I think, Andrea, you said it the other day that let's not forget we have so many other participants right now, 104 other participants that haven't had a chance to even voice all of their concerns. We really do need to take stock. And this brings me to my final point of the desire for, in the context of review, of a review from an Indigenous perspective, that we have the review in relation to the whole machinery of the UNFCCC, but that we can't lose sight of how Indigenous peoples review this process and whether or not it's favorable to them or unfavorable. So I just wanted to make those particular comments and just thank everybody for what they've contributed, and that it's been fruitful to have lively and active debate that has revealed differences, but also just recognize that we can overcome them through dialogue. So thanks again, and sorry for taking up so much time, not just today, but throughout the last 4 days. It's just difficult to get across everything that you're feeling. And I guess, you know, we're all political animals too. That's the other dynamic that we have to recognize in all of this. So thanks again, Kriana.
Thank you, Daly. I agree with a lot of what you said, and it reiterates some of the points I've made from my very opening statement at this session about strategic evaluation, analysis. As Hindu keeps saying, it's the same for our peoples here in the desert. Do we make a difference? Has our work made a difference? Is it making a difference? How can it better make a difference? And I think your guidance and observations, as others have made, about the work plan that we're charged with developing for the next period of session really can take a lot of lessons from this one in terms of the amount, and being a little bit more strategic with the input of Indigenous peoples of what things cannot actually make a difference. Graham, I think if you're going to comment, then I think your comment will be the last one of this session before we move on to our closing prayer. And again, we don't even have time for an evaluation of this meeting. You know, what was good, what we try to do that with the co-chairs and vice chairs, but how can we take comments that have been made to say, how can our meetings be more efficient, more participatory, more accessible, all the things that we've said are our value is going forward. But, you know, maybe members and participants can do that online, you know, is what worked, what should we keep, what should we change? Are reports better online rather than taking time so we have more time for discussion? All of those things I think we're open to hearing from everybody, since we don't have time for an evaluation of the meeting online. So Graham, as the co-chair of the Indigenous Caucus, aka the IIPFCC, if you can make some closing remarks on behalf of the caucus or yourself, we'll go on to the closing prayer, and our next year of work. Thank you. Choke.
Yeah, miigwech, Andrea, and apologies for not being as participatory as I would have liked. We're managing multiple things in this Zoom world. I want to just comment on a few things. And first, I just want to acknowledge on the work of the FWG members, the co-chairs, the vice chairs, as well as the secretariat, and just reflect on, even since we've moved online, the transformation and approach from, Microsoft Teams with no translation to Zoom with kind of one language of translation, and now we are able to have kind of 4 languages and their interpretation. And so I think that's kind of an important trajectory, and I guess something that can continue. And how do we make those spaces for more participatory conversations? And Zoom is a really interesting tool to use breakout rooms to help hear from kind of all the experts around the circle that we have. And I feel that one of the things that we struggle with in these condensed timelines is hearing from our experts and our relatives around the world, which, based on the caliber of contributions that we have seen, needs to have its own space. And so hopefully, we can continue to kind of modify our mode of work to have that kind of participatory approach and reflections. And I think that, stems from, who's on the agenda and how do we ensure that, the Indigenous relatives are there, to how do we have our meeting set up in a way that we can have breakout room discussions and hearing from, folks from around the world. I do think that that there's a variety of really good kind of future discussions that were brought up. And I think the kind of parallel Indigenous review, predominantly potentially led by the caucus, will be important, and figuring out what are the modes of entry that we have will be pretty useful for the conversations and the reflections that we have. I'd like to suggest one of the things that I think Estebancio raised at the very beginning is the challenge of kind of full and effective participation of Indigenous relatives. And I think that requires the kind of preemptive circulation of materials, the translation of those materials, and where necessary, the ability to have kind of technical level conversations on those to enter into the FWG space, as informed as possible. And we tried to have one, on Sunday, but that can always be improved. And so wanting to maybe work with the secretariat and the co-chairs to figure out that sequencing of events to make sure that, not only are our Indigenous relatives included, but also that, they have the sufficient level of information to contribute to these very technical things. And I just want to close on, I think echoing all of the points raised, but Hindus and Dailies most recently, in terms of, the reason why all of us are here is to kind of avoid catastrophic climate change, and, should be kind of contextualized in that longer term vision, and hoping that, all the work that we can do is kind of informed to, holding countries accountable for, for example, the kind of overshooting of their NDCs, the massive temperature increase in estimations that we're seeing. 3 degrees is estimated right now in 2100. Canada's Arctic, that means 9 degrees. Canada, it means 6 degrees. And so, we know the implications of this. And so hopefully, this is one space where we can start to get to that kind of tangible action required to address it. And I think that, recognizing that there are procedural things to kind of, to navigate, making sure that we honor that message is really important. And so I want to close with that, and also just close on, sharing my thoughts and prayers with everybody in this kind of holiday season. Hopefully all of you have some time and space with your families, and that you have, a bit of rest and relaxation before the new year. And so Chimigwech to all of you, and Chimigwech to Andrea and Yo for their incredible facilitation. And yeah, hope you all have a good holiday. Miigwech.
Thank you very much. I just have one hand left, and I think that's Hindu. Do you have your hand up?
Oh, yeah, no, sorry.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you. And I will just say, just to conclude the meeting before I turn over to Yo for any concluding remarks he has, I echo the thanks that has been offered from Graham and everyone to each and every one of the members, our presenters who are here from the UN agencies, our participants, and again, regrets from Yo and I that there wasn't adequate time as we had originally planned. We thought we had a very, open kind of not packed agenda, and it didn't turn out that way, it seems. And we can look at other ways, maybe as Frank suggested or Graham suggested, setting a big block of time just for the participants and Indigenous peoples to have the floor, rather than responding, to every agenda item, which sometimes there's just not time. We have to move on. So we can work with those things for our upcoming meetings. And thank you to the Secretariat. I'm realizing as co-chair how hardworking they really are in supporting this work. And please, Tiffany, express to everybody, and also please express again to Yosef Nassaf for his opening remarks that I think were very important and changed the dynamic a little bit about the way we're thinking about what we need to do and what we can do. So with that, I look forward to our strategic evaluation and discussion in preparation for our last year of work as this body in hopefully the end of January. And look forward to talking to our Indigenous regions about what their views are, so we can all bring those thoughts into the process. And of course, we have state representatives to talk to your state bodies about, how we can be more effective to actually make an impact where it counts, which is, reversing and adapting and ensuring the survival of our peoples, given the catastrophic situation in many, if not all, of our regions that's happening now, not in the future, but now. So with that, I will turn this over to Yo for any final comments. Tiffany, do you need any final housekeeping? Good, great, thank you. Yo, and then we'll move to our closing prayer with blessings and good health and good heart for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Not much for me to say, just echoing much of what you said in terms of thanking the members, the broader group of participants in the meeting. Particular thanks to the Secretariat for their continued hard work in support of our work, as well as thanks to the interpreters who provided very valuable assistance to our work. Just very briefly, though, before we go to the closing ceremony, just noting that in terms of the dates for the next meeting, the next formal meeting of the FWG or FWG 5, that I am suggesting that we have that discussion intersessionally by email, pending the upcoming discussion of the Bureau of the UNFCCC about the dates for the next SBs and so forth in 2021. And so we'll keep an ear out for what the Bureau decides. And then as FWG members, we can communicate intersessionally by email about the dates for the next FWG meeting. Hopefully that can go forward. And also noting, like we said, that there will be a trial launch or a soft launch of the web portal, of the LCIPP web portal right after the closing ceremony. It is scheduled to be live for about an hour. And so if you are joining us by Zoom, you are here in this meeting. You do not need to leave this Zoom space in order to be able to see the web portal. If you are watching this meeting via the live stream, rather than in this Zoom setting, we ask you to kindly go to the LCIPP live demo web page, and the link to the web portal will be there on the web page. And perhaps the Secretariat can post a link in the chat to assist. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm not sure. Can the people in the live stream see the chat? If not, then that doesn't really make sense. But in any case, hopefully you can find your way to the LCIPP web portal, and you can follow us there. Tiffany, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the easy way to get there if you're watching by live stream is to go to LCIPP events, and then on the events page, you'll see that particular event. It's called live demonstration.
Great, thank you very much. And just on my end, thank you, colleagues, for your hard and good work, your collegiality, and your commitment to our collective work. We have one more year left in our initial 2-year work plan, as well as in our terms in the FWG. We have done a lot of tremendous work already in a very compressed time period. But of course, as I think Daly said, we are going through growing pains as an FWG. And we need to do all we can to make sure that we give ourselves and our contributors sufficient time to assist our work, including through virtual settings and by email, so that we end up being an effective, practical, and inclusive body carrying forward our work in light of the climate crisis. So I look forward to working with all of you in that spirit going into the next year and beyond. I think that's it for me. And I'll be happy to turn over to Andrea if you would kindly lead us to the closing ceremony, to introduce the individual for our closing ceremony. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Jokwe. And I just want to say publicly to everybody what a pleasure it is to work with Yo as the state's co-chair. I think we have a very nice rhythm that just came naturally for us. And I just want to recognize how much I appreciate working with you, Yo, in front of everybody. I just want to say that. Thank you. And I think everybody's comments are taken to heart. I look forward to having more in-depth evaluation based on the input of our members and knowledge holders in our regions. And with that, I will introduce the leader who's going to be doing the closing ceremony. Many times in our ceremonies, we have the same person do the opening and closing. So it is a full circle for us. And that's how it worked out for this time. So as everybody who participated in the opening were able to benefit by the songs and good words of our young spiritual leader from the Tohono O'odham Nation here in the Sonora Desert, Ms. Amy Juan, and she's going to be closing this meeting for us, for everybody's good health, good heart, the well-being of your families, your peoples and nations, and the planet, our Mother Earth as a whole, and our future generations for which we're doing this work. So Amy, I will turn the floor over to you for our closing. Thank you, and chokwe to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. Kuksiarik, everybody. I'm coming to you from the Tohono O'odham Nation here at my home in the community of Santa Rosa Ranch. And I'm just really honored to be a part of your meeting by helping to pray. I was listening to a lot of the conversations that were happening just now, and I understand and I feel what a great responsibility it is to make these decisions, to have these discussions, and to also think of everyone, to think of our families, our communities, and the world. And I'm very blessed in terms of, I'm young. I know that I'm young, but I'm also very fortunate that I was able to learn from many of our elders here in our community, and just, learn from the land. And, talking about the climate crisis, Tana'ata means desert people. And so, we're used to living in a desert environment with very little water. But it is scary, especially this year, seeing the changes. Since I've been able to grow up here in my own community, I've seen these gradual changes happen from not seeing certain insects anymore, especially one of my favorites, which was the makum. It's a caterpillar that we would see every spring. There used to be so many that you would just see them crossing the roads, but now you don't see that anymore. And other things. And this year, we had very little rain, and seeing the effect that has on the land, and in terms has an effect on us, in terms of the foods that we can harvest, the medicines that we can use, and how that contributes to our overall health, or our apatak, as we would say, not just our physical health, but our mental health and our spiritual health, and all of that. And so I really appreciate the conversations that I've heard, considering all of those things. And yes, it is urgent. So that just brings me to, offering this song and offering these thoughts. What I was always told was, we need to look to our the wisdom from our past to create solutions for our future. And I believe in that so greatly, and thinking of, these lessons that have been passed down through our stories, through our songs, and really paying attention to those things, because they do mean something. That is wisdom that's passed on from our elders and our ancestors. And, being able to practice those things, we know that it's true. We know it to be true. And so what I like to do is I'm just going to burn some shugi, some medicine here. And I like to ask all of you to just, sit back. You've been in meetings past couple of days, and just to take time to breathe, to take a deep breath, to relax your shoulders, relax your mind, and being open to receiving this song. And I know that many of us have, the ways that we pray. And so I invite you to do that, to call upon your ancestors, your helpers, your land, to help you in your job, in this responsibility to figure out these solutions. So when I did the opening prayer and the opening song, I sang a song about good light spreading all over the earth, and that all of you and the work that you do is that good light, and taking on this job and these tasks. To close our meeting today, I like to offer a different kind of song. And I was thinking, usually when I do these prayers or blessings, I let the song come to me. It's not up to me to choose what it is, but rather, what is the calling to share for that moment in time. And the song I like to share this morning is a song about the flood. Many of us have these stories about floods that have came, and who, that caused to create a new world, or a new time, or just a big reset of the earth and how we live in it and how we move forward. And the song is about the water coming in, the whirlpools of water coming in, and how the people were afraid. But they accepted what was going to happen, and they began to sing. They began to sing songs of understanding and acceptance, but also of resilience and strength, knowing that whatever was going to happen, that they were going to continue moving forward. And thus we're here today because of that strength of our ancestors. And thinking about water, water is very precious. We are all born in water. When we're in our mother's wombs, we all have had that start. All of us, no matter where we came from, we've all had that start. And so in that grounding and that foundation, that we come together as human beings, born into these, born into this world, and that we continue to find ways to work together. And I have my shauku here just as a reminder. It has women and the people dancing and holding hands around the earth. And so I just ask for all of you in your own way to offer prayers of strength and resilience to each other and to the world, and to let this song help you in that way. And I ask that this song bless you and cover you from my people and my home, from here in the desert to all of you throughout the world. So, sapo. Welcome to Taknyay Himaka. Welcome to Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Welcome ka kita no tamay kita. Tamay ngusuta Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Welcome to Taknyay Himaka. Welcome to Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Welcome ka kita no tamay kita. Tamay ngusuta Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Welcome ka kita no tamay kita. Tamay ngusuta Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Welcome ka kita no tamay kita. Tamay ngusuta Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Welcome to Taknyay Himaka. Welcome to Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Welcome ka kita no tamay kita. Tamay ngusuta Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Welcome ka kita no tamay kita. Tamay ngusuta Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Welcome ka kita no tamay kita. Tamay ngusuta Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Welcome ka kita no tamay kita. Tamay ngusuta Taknyay Himaka. Wato tuwi Pinoy. Sapo, I wish many blessings of protection, prayers of protection and safety and good health to all of you, your families, and your communities. Sapo.
Shoku Desia, thank you so much to Amy.
your song about water washed a lot of things from me that needed to go, and brought back the strength of what's real to, I think, our group. So with that, we have finished our fourth formal meeting of the Facilitative Working Group. We've already all thanked each other, so I don't need to do that again. But that feeling stays in my heart, and I think we are providing the time that's necessary for the next stage, which is a interactive run through of our portal. But before I turn the floor over to the Secretariat, I would just like to remind us that we set up a committee, including Indigenous peoples and state representatives, to further this work for us. And that's an option that we can consider going forward, is setting up other committees that will involve not just members of the Facilitative Working Group, but representatives of our regions. So it's just something to keep in mind how successful that model was in this case. With that, I will turn the floor over to Coco and thank the members of the committee that worked on the portal to bring it to this phase almost being born. Thank you very much. I'm not sure which of you are going to take the floor. Coco, I see you there.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Choko Tesia.
Thank you, everyone, and congratulations for the successful conclusion of FWG4. I know you've been working very hard for many days. And with this, would like to welcome you to the demonstration of the LCIPP web portal, which has been really characteristic of the trailblazing nature of LCIPP, as well as FWG and the many contributors working side by side. Before I turn over the time to my colleague David, we just want to acknowledge specifically the support of Germany, Sweden, and Finland, who've provided financial support for this. And I also want to take the moment to acknowledge our many parties, especially who support the work of LCIPP. Without your generous contributions, it would be very difficult to move forward this important work. So thank you very much. David, maybe I can just, I know that we have little time, and let me just hand over to you. You're the main show and the thing that everybody's been waiting to see. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Coco, very much for the introduction, and thank you also for all the support we have received in basically building this. Let me just share my screen, and I promise you this will not be long. Okay, this is just a little intro to show you where we are. So as promised, the implementation of the portal was done as per the prototype that we presented also in June, I think it was, and 2 months ago. This has been basically implemented in technical terms. And we have concluded one round of testing and fixes already. So the portal presents all the important functionalities, but as you may see when you browse through it, there might be little small glitches, stuff that we have not yet fixed or could not fix yet. But rest assured, there will be another improvement phase for this one. And after the live demonstration that we are having here, we'll definitely go back and do all the testing again and refine it so that it's really ready to be launched. The access you will be provided by Wissam in the chat is temporary, and it will be withdrawn after this demonstration, so we can go back and test. As Andrea already said, we were supported by a very able subcommittee that was incredibly helpful. And I just want to say thanks to all of them who have been here and supporting us in all the way. We had some meetings and a lot of input that we had digested, and something that couldn't have been done without them. And it has also been trailblazing in the way we work together in implementing this. I also want to take the opportunity before handing over to Joanna to thank also all the colleagues, both from the company who helped us implement this, as well as different divisions in the Secretariat. They have done a tremendous job. Some of them haven't slept throughout the last days, or very little, as like it's usual with tech projects that in the end, you always need to fix a lot. And also, I think probably it's worth mentioning that we had a all-female design team. We had a female-led technical implementation team. From our side, our distinguished Scrum Master was female, so that's not very common in tech. And I just want to acknowledge that was also a really great thing. I want to hand over to Joanna now to give her perspective, like a little short intervention from the subcommittee as a member. Joanna, floor is yours.
Great, thanks, David. Yeah, so hi to everyone. If I haven't met you, my name is Joanna, and I work for the Inuit Circumpolar Council and have been supporting Daly as the Arctic Indigenous representative on the Facilitative Working Group, and have been the subcommittee member for the Arctic region. I've been engaged with the portal development since March 2019, so it's been almost 2 years since it kicked off. And in that time, the subcommittee's work and role has been quite extensive in the design. We were really involved in the minute details, working with the Secretariat and the technical design team so closely. It started by working together to develop an in-depth understanding of users of the portal, thinking about who the users will be, what they'll use it for, how they'll use it. We worked to make sure that Indigenous and party perspectives and concerns around the portal were captured in the vision document. And then we carefully reviewed it with the design team so that they had a really clear idea of our perspectives and our priorities for the portal. And I'll talk about some of those priorities in just a second. We also talked about the information layout. So what goes on the main page, what's in the top bar, what's in the menus. We got into all that detail as well. And we did that all in a design workshop, and then had review meetings where we saw drafts that were built around the input that we gave, and were able to provide feedback to make sure that that input was captured correctly. So it was very much a back and forth a way of working, which was very useful. And then that all culminated into looking at mock web pages and a prototype so that we could click on things and see, does that word work there? Does that button work there? And then recently we've been discussing within the subcommittee text on the rights and knowledge safeguards that was discussed at the FWG 4 meeting. And then we'll also, our work is continuing a little longer to discuss the submission process for how content can be submitted and what guidelines should look like for that. So yeah, throughout every step of the way, I think that there were lots of priorities and concerns that came up from the subcommittee that were addressed in depth. Some of those priorities included making sure that the portal wasn't confused as a platform. So making sure that it's seen as a tool for the platform, and being realistic about the limitations of the portal. Also, making sure that the principles of the Indigenous Peoples Caucus were upheld and were at the forefront of the design, making sure that the distinction between Indigenous peoples and the regions was clear, and making sure that the design encourages users to connect directly with regions rather than assuming that there's one Indigenous voice that's shown through the portal. So there's regional pages, which really gets at that distinction. We also talked a lot about the treatment of Indigenous knowledge and had really explicit and ongoing discussions about FPIC and safeguarding Indigenous knowledge. And we led the design so that it was clear that a full understanding of the knowledge of Indigenous peoples and what equitable and ethical engagement of knowledge looks like before we would even consider having an option to post Indigenous knowledge. So we really moved away from the idea of a knowledge database or repository very quickly, you'll see an information hub, and it was very intentional to be called an information hub and not a knowledge hub. So it's really, again, guided the design in a way that is promoting the sharing of knowledge protocols and knowledge sharing protocols, and made sure to flag any language that would suggest otherwise. We also, the subcommittee spoke a lot about differentiation between Indigenous peoples and local communities and making that clear in the design, highlighting the importance of rights-based engagement as a process, ensuring that the leadership and the contribution of Indigenous peoples is at the forefront, and also the issue of accessibility, and that extended from language, but also how the users are going to navigate through the portal and visually what that looks like. And then just final comments in reflecting on the process. I think it was exemplary in a couple of ways. We, the Indigenous peoples representatives and party representatives, were engaged equally in the development and design from the beginning. So really the visioning, scoping, design, helping to drive decisions throughout at major junctions, and getting to see again, how has our input been incorporated, and was it understood properly and in the way that we intended it. So I think that's really on the way to what co-development should look like. The process was really user-friendly, with using technical but creative and visual tools and participatory tools that really maximize the benefit of the committee, the subcommittee members, and maximize the participation. And then lastly, it really ensured that we were on the same page as everyone, the secretariat, the technical design team, the committee. We were all in direct contact with one another. So there was no middleman. So that was a really productive way of working. So I think overall it was a very effective structure. It honored the distinction between regions. It ensured balanced input. And I'll just wrap up by saying a great thanks to the Secretariat, who made a strong effort to ensure that everyone on the committee could be engaged, especially when COVID hit and we had to work in creative ways. And also thanks to my colleagues in the Arctic region who provided ongoing input and guidance. I was really able to carry forward that, and it was so important working together as a region, and it continues to be. And so I thank the Arctic region for that. So I think it's great to see the portal at this stage. I am really keen to hear the feedback, and as we continue to make improvements. And I hope that the subcommittee was able to ensure that the design is meaningful and that the portal is fit for its purpose and will serve its users well. So with that, I will end and pass it back to David.
Thanks, Joanna, for the insights, and thanks that you found it useful. And I think we had a pretty great working relationship with the whole subcommittee. I can absolutely say that. Okay, so let's go to the live demo. I can see that some of you are already having a go at it, and also, because that's something that comes a little bit out of the safeguard statement, the rights safeguard statement, is that how can we implement what's in there? So if you have any idea, please pass them on to us. Also, how can use that structure, that functionality, and how we can implement it in practical terms, right? So I'll go to Uppsala. Oh, this doesn't work for me. I will now go to through the portal myself. Okay, this looks strange. 1 second, I need to. Okay, so I'll go through the portal, and whenever you have any questions, please don't feel free to interrupt and let me know. I think you're also trying out yourself, and the access data is in the chat. So when we go to the landing page, you will note two things. It's basically you have the navigation item here, or the main header, and you will see that at the moment we have English here, but that the other languages are incorporated here, and that they're grayed out, because it's actually very hard to do this if the actual content is not yet completely ready. So when you go on the homepage, you will see the right safeguard statement right here at the top, and some I've heard that some of this have mentioned that it's not clickable. It's just the click region is a little bit below that. We'll fix that in the final version. That's what I also talked about, the little tweaks that we still have to make. So when you click on it here, it will open up. Just right below that, you will find the ways to engage. You will find the functions, the different functions of the LCIPP, the upcoming events that you can filter by different tabs here. So you can see what are UNFCCC LCIPP events or other events for which there are none at the moment, because they can be uploaded. And we have a little shortcuts to pages of interest. And you will also see that we have the right safeguard statement again here down in the footer. So it's basically also like really there's a short link wherever you go to that statement. When you go to the background page, there's two functions or two sections I want to highlight. Is the 2020 to 21 work plan, because that will capture the main activity the FWG is doing in what needs to be done in order to implement the platform. Let me just check. I think sending a video and browsing through a page seems to be a little bit much for my connection here. Okay, I hope I'm getting messages from my colleague that this is a problem that happens not only for me, but for others. So we are currently facing a connection problem, but our ICT colleagues are in the room, so I'm pretty sure they can. We are checking currently what's the root cause of this. Okay, let me just check. Go here. So if you don't have any issues, please, anyways, explore yourself. I'm just giving some background information. So please click around.
Just as David mentioned, please don't use Explorer when you are going through the web portal, and feel free to just use the link that we shared and have a look around and click on all the different things if it does work for you. And if it doesn't, we'll get it back online in a minute.
Yeah. Yes, Anna, same issue here, but our IT colleagues are already on it. So let's see what is happening there.
And we should note that this is not the fault of the all-women technical team.
This is an internet problem. David, I'd propose that everybody takes a 5-minute break, because we actually haven't had a break the whole afternoon. So maybe we take 5 minutes, people can go to the bathroom or make some tea, and then we come back at 1/2 the hour, and then hopefully we'll be back online.
Tiffany, at the same time, may you just clarify, because the agenda that you shared, we're supposed to finish at 8. Even I understand it is the Facilitative Working Group, but the activity of the the activity of the LCIPP, I do not see any agenda around it. Then
I can clarify.
Yeah, just let me finish, please.
Sure.
And now, let me finish, please. Thank you. And now I am confused because I wanted to know what is in this agenda that we are starting now, and at what time are we going to finish? Because I plan my agenda of today, and I think from Asian people it's already about 1 a.m. So we wanted to see all the clarification on about the timing and what will be else after this one. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, I can clarify. Thanks, Hindu, for the question. FWG4 is closed, it's ended. This is just a live demonstration of a web portal by the Secretariat. The web portal is a Secretariat mandate, so we're just giving a live demonstration to give people a chance to have a look around. Hopefully it gets back online soon. All the presentations are finished, so thank you very much to the interpreters. We note that you have worked overtime, so thank you very much for that, but we won't be needing any more interpretation. From now on, it'll really just be giving people a chance to go through the web pages for the next approximately half an hour. We do hope to get them back online, but this is not part of the FWG meeting, Hindu. So you're right, it did end. This is no longer part of the FWG meeting. The FWG meeting, unfortunately, went a bit over time, as Yo and Andrea pointed out. So that's why it ended a bit late, but this is now a separate event. I hope that clarifies.
Thanks for that, Tiffany. And yes, just to reiterate that we have concluded the formal FWG meeting. This is a Secretariat separate trial run of the website. And my apologies as co-chair for the delay in concluding our formal meeting. But I'm happy that folks are able to join us a little bit at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's mean it is optional. So you can stay or you do the meeting, right?
That is correct, indeed.
Yeah, Hindu, the agenda that was circulated indicated that after the prayer, our meeting was over, and this is like an extra activity that the Secretariat requested just to show everybody the progress on the portal, but it's not part of our meeting. So you can go, anyone can leave if they want, unless they really want to look at the portal and provide feedback in the chat. We're not going to have a discussion or anything after this. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And we're just receiving notification that they need to restart the server. So if anyone wants to take, oh, what? Oh, it's up again. Great.
Okay, but David, we did announce a small break. So I think let's take a 5-minute break. If anyone wants to continue going through the platform, that's fine. But otherwise, yeah, feel free to take a break and then come back. How long can we leave the web portal online for, David? Just to give people a chance.
There's no, I mean, we can have this until probably the end of the day.
Okay, great. So what I suggest is that we leave it online for the next hour and a half for people to have a look through at their own pace. We do realize that it's very late for people in certain time zones, and we apologize for that. So feel free to explore, have a look around. We don't have interpretation anymore. So we'll just let you go through it. And please do send any comments that you have or suggestions through to the email address that I think Chad can put into the chat there, lcipp@unfccc.int. And we really appreciate any feedback that we receive. Thank you, everyone.
Tiffany, this is Andrea again. Are we having a co-chair's final debrief now or when?
We won't be able to join that right now, Andrea.
Okay.
Would you like to set that up for tomorrow? I'll email you.
Or next week. But I think we should have it.
Well, I'll send you an email. Thanks, Andrea.
Okay.
Thank you.
David. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was going to log off now, but
Yeah.
I will get in touch with our Sami colleagues because it looks to me as though we don't have sufficient balance between Inuit and Sami for the Arctic region page.
Sure.
And the other, but I'll discuss this with Joanna and others. For example, also all the links to their various different websites, the Sami Council, the Sami Parliament. But I recognize that this is, the first take on this, but we'll try to enrich it with more of a balanced approach. And even the narrative, for example, though I appreciate seeing things like our marine environment project, the Pikiala Sosuak, and other things there that we really will need to balance this a bit more.
Sure.
And I'm sure that our Sami colleagues will have some ideas about links to the Sami Council, their events, but also the respective Sami parliaments. So we'll work with them a bit more to reflect some of the needed change there. And I think it'll only enhance it. My only other comment is that generally speaking, I wonder if each of the pages can be a little bit more vibrant with photographs.
Absolutely.
The blue is very cool. It gives you that kind of a aesthetically, but if it could be enlivened, with diversity of photos to illustrate the diversity.
Absolutely. So just to take into account your two comments, this is not something that we would launch like this, right? It's basically something, it's a start. Taking into account to show you the elements, it's not done. The whole content needs to be carefully reworded and really also checked by you. About the photos, yes, there will be photos. So actually, there can be an image gallery at the top of the page. We didn't put something because we didn't just want to put a photo or some photo there that would probably misrepresent what you would actually want to see on that page, right? Or what would be characteristic. So we can put a lot of images and we can put other elements to make it more vibrant. Absolutely. So that's all foreseen already in the development. It's there. We just need to populate it with more content.
Yeah. And what I have also found, because we actually have difficulty in the diversity of the landscapes. But I have found that in order to be a bit more balanced about representation of the extraordinary diversity, that landscapes themselves, rather than images of peoples or individuals, that the landscapes really also speak volumes about, especially climate change. If we and I know that we want it to be attractive, but then there's that reality of climate change where it's not so attractive, So I guess what I'm saying is, so for example, the images of permafrost thawing, it'll be in a landscape, but there's no evidence of permafrost thawing. If you get what I'm saying, that
yes.
we, so it's kind of being mindful about the diversity, but also maybe capturing some of the subject matter that we're addressing, even in a balanced way, even with what is aesthetically pleasing, but having having the reality revealed through photos also.
The team will surely get in touch with you and basically, right, I mean, well before we launch the full portal, in terms of really ensuring that it represents the region properly.
Yeah, yeah.
And also the topic, of course.
Yeah, yeah. We have a number of photos that could be shared as well from our different offices. And I think we have put out a call asking for contributions of photos, but and I'll see where Joanna is with that. But I do know that we have a series of photos from a project that we did entitled I Am Inuit. So there's a collection there, but then also from our different regional organizations, there should be additional. So we don't have a lack of them. I know that you have some standards in terms of the resolution and other things of that sort. So we'll see what we can do to offer and complement further. So yeah, those were my initial comments, and thanks for all of the work that you and the technical team, the IT team, and the subcommittee did on this. I think it'll be a useful resource. Yeah.
Thank you, Deli, and also for your comments, which is of course something that we will take into account.
Yeah, I think all of my Sami colleagues went off because they had other meetings, but I'll follow up with them because I think that balance is really important. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good, good. Yo, I guess we'll see you in 2021, if not before. Yeah, and I have been writing to others saying that let's hope it's a COVID-free 2021 at some point, but I'll also follow up with you on, as you've seen, about the January 21 webinar, and thank you for agreeing to participate there. And then I know that at least on my desk, I have some unfinished business with the BBNJ. So
mine as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Daly. It's been a pleasure working with you as always. And